Welcome back to another episode of The Amazing City. And this one is obviously a little bit special because it's not just me and Jack rambling about different nonsense, me rambling about Carlos Correa coming to the Mets or something like that. We have a guest, and as you can see, it is Michael Mayer. And if I may, I brought this up to Jack. I think I have a nickname for you. I'm going to coin a little nickname if you don't mind. How about the mayor of Mets Twitter? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm okay with it.
Love it. Love it. So yeah, I mean, listen, we got a lot to talk about, but first, how are things going? How's your
Good,
off season been going?
good. Obviously my off season just kind of revolves around the Mets, so we'll we'll see. Hopefully it gets more interesting soon.
Yeah. I asked this to Jack and I'll ask you this. We'll lead with this. There's been a narrative this offseason that winter meetings this year is going to be a little bit more busy than the past couple of years. Are you buying into that, especially in the Mets case?
Yeah, I think so. I think everything kind of dies down around Thanksgiving, just about every normal year. But yeah, I think between Friday and Saturday of this weekend, kind of leading into the winter meetings, I think is when we're going to see a lot of action. And I think it kind of depends on if any of the big dominoes fall. Like, say, Aaron Judge signs on Monday, then I think you're due to see a ton of action. I mean, then Brandon Nimmo probably signs, and then other guys sign like Trey Turner, stuff like that, or Jacob DeGrom signs early in the week. Again, a whole domino of pitching kind of rifles out after that. And then you'll see some trades too, because there's teams that once they miss out on a guy like Judge or Nimmo, or there's a lot of teams that could use a center fielder, and there's only really two of them if you're calling Judge a center fielder. So yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of action. And then I mean, when's the last time we saw in normal winter meetings?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's been a long time. The last time was when I was in San Diego in 2019. And I mean, there was a fair amount of action. That was Garrett Cole, Anthony Rendon. So you had some
Strasburg.
big pieces. Yeah, Strasburg. So you had some big pieces that signed then, and I think we're going to see a repeat of that. I think between Judge, DeGrom, and you have the four elite shortstops, I think there's a chance we see a lot of big names come off the board next week.
So you talk about, obviously you mentioned some guys the Mets are said to be interested in. You mentioned some of their own guys that they're trying to bring back. What's your outlook on the Mets offseason as a whole? Like, what do you think their biggest priorities are? What do you think they need to do, and where they kind of stand on some of those names you mentioned, like a DeGrom, like a Nimmo, and those dominoes you mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think they first off they got it started on the right foot by bringing back Diaz. I think that was a no-brainer and kind of just something that they were going to do regardless of kind of the cost. They felt like Diaz was a piece that they needed regardless of how much it cost in the end, and they got it done. And I mean, that was a huge start for them for the offseason, considering how many other free agents that they have and how many other needs they have to fill. I mean, they clearly need two starters, and I don't think it's just two starters. It's really an ace-like starter, whether we're talking about Rodon or DeGrom. And then they need another starter that's, I mean, with a 3-2-3 upside. I mean, we're talking about replacing Chris Bassett. Maybe it is Chris Bassett, but you have to replace that spot in the rotation. So you're looking at, I mean, a 1-3 starter, and they need center fielder. And outside of Nimmo, there's nothing. There's literally nothing on the free agent market when it comes to center fielders. I mean, I know they've mentioned, well, they'd be comfortable with Starling Marte in center field and then getting a right fielder. I think that's kind of a last ditch effort. Marte's going to be 34, coming off a season where he missed a lot of time because of injuries that hindered his running. So that's obviously not going to help him in center field. He's coming off surgery that we still don't know exactly where, but we know it's, again, an injury that's likely not going to help him track down fly balls in the outfield. So I think Nimmo is really a must sign, much like Diaz is or was, just because there's so few other options. The trouble with Nimmo is that he's basically the only center fielder on the market, and there's a lot of teams that need a center fielder. So you've already heard about 9 or 10 teams that have legitimate interest in Nimmo. So the price is going to be expensive. But and obviously they need the starting pitching too. I think there's more options in the starting pitching. Like we haven't mentioned Kodai Senga. They could bring Taiwan Walker back, Jamison Tyone, Jose Quintana. I mean, the list of the starting pitching is certainly deeper than it is for the outfield. And we haven't even mentioned a bullpen that only consists of Edwin Diaz and Drew Smith. So they obviously have a ton of work to do in the bullpen too. Billy Epler's got his hands full.
It's going to be busy. Yeah, I think, and I think we can all agree that the expectations for 2023 as of right now should probably not be as they're going to win 101 games where it's a bust season. But just trying to go back of some of the things you're saying, do you think the re-signing of Brandon Nimmo is a higher priority to the Mets than, say, re-signing Jacob deGrom?
I think you could argue that simply what they bring to the team. Obviously, deGrom is a Hall of Fame caliber pitcher, but you also don't know how many innings he's going to pitch in a year. We're at the point now where he hasn't thrown many innings over the last couple of years. And we just don't know going forward what that's going to look like at 34, 35, 36, and 37 years old. I mean, not everyone's Justin Verlander, and Justin Verlander missed time because of an injury in that time period. And not everyone's Max Scherzer. And even we saw it with Max Scherzer this year. He only threw 145 innings, which is very low for him. So I think you could certainly make a case for Nimmo, and particularly like I'm saying, with the market with Nimmo, just after him, it just drops off here. I mean, the second best center fielder free agent is what, Kevin Kiermaier?
Yes.
Yeah. So the
Cody
drop off,
Bellinger, I guess.
Yeah, Cody Bellinger. Yeah. Yeah.
Even
So,
then,
yeah,
how much
Cody
better
Bellinger.
than Kiermaier's Cody Bellinger these days?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, either way, both of those guys, you're essentially looking at just defense and hoping you get some offense out of either of those guys. So it's a significant drop. I mean, I don't want to diminish what deGrom is, but dropping off from deGrom to, say, Rodon, I mean, there's a good chance that Rodon is similar value-wise to deGrom over the next 3 years. I don't think that's that far of a stretch.
So you bring up pitching, talk about pitching a lot. There's been a lot of teams rumored to be interested in the top level of starting pitching, whether it be deGrom, Senga, Rodon. You know, they do have internal options. You know, we saw Tyler McGill flash in 2021. David Peterson definitely had his moments last year. Is there a feasible scenario where, you know, the Mets whiff on a good amount of these top guys and are in a spot where they're expecting big innings out of Peterson and McGill?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the Mets, I don't think they whiff on, say, deGrom, Rodon, and Senga. I would guess that they get one of those three guys.
Would you say you're confident they do?
Yeah, I would say they're confident that they get one of those three guys and then still get another starter of, I mean, talking about like Bassett, Walker, Quintana, Teon, the guys we've mentioned before. And there's other guys on that list too.
Yeah, like you said, a three with a two upside.
Yeah. So I would say I'm pretty confident that the Mets sign two starters that aren't back end starters. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Right.
And I mean, so yeah, I mean, that leaves you still with the potential with David Peterson and Tyler McGill being the 6'7" or 5'6" potentially, depending on injuries and stuff like that. So they're going to see starts just like they did this year. And hopefully McGill stays healthy so that he can be that actual depth for their starters. But I think something would have to go very, very wrong for Peterson and or McGill to be penciled in to the rotation.
I'll ask one more deGrom question, then I promise I'll stop. This seems to be a trend for me where I talk a lot about deGrom resigning.
Yeah.
There was a screenshot circulating with Steve Cohen liking a tweet from an MLB Nerds account saying that the Phillies and the Rays have emerged as potential suitors for DeGrom. Obviously, the Phillies landed DeGrom, or even the Braves, which kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
That would be the nightmare scenario for Mets fans. I know Steve Cohen doesn't think about what the fans think, but would an interdivision team signing DeGrom, would that like motivate the Mets a little bit more to try to bring him back? Like the team's interest, I should say.
No, yeah, I absolutely think that. I mean, look, like you're talking about with Cohen, he's a fan.
Right.
I mean, he's also a Mets fan, so it's kind of he knows the rivalry between the Phillies. He knows what it means to lose a pitcher to the Phillies. I mean, can you imagine that he would have let Zach Wheeler go to the Phillies if he was the owner back when Wheeler was a free agent? No, I can't imagine. So, I mean, can you imagine him watching DeGrom and Wheeler front the Phillies rotation?
Maybe Syndergaard too.
And yeah, Syndergaard. Can you imagine that?
No. And you know the Phillies would have tried to sign Edwin Diaz if he hit the market.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They would have been the first teams that called. So.
And your question immediately reminds. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that the Phillies or Rays are real contenders for DeGrom. I mean, a lot of teams are gonna reach out and ask him, like, talk to his agent, kind of see where they are. That's gonna happen. More teams will come out, but I don't think beyond the Mets, Rangers, Dodgers. I don't think there's going to be a ton more teams that are willing to pay a starting pitcher $40 million, which is what he's looking for. I mean, that DeGrom's going to sign for $40 million a year, and there's just not very many teams that are going to pay that.
Okay. Slater, you asking about keeping the Phillies from signing a pitcher just reminds me of the Diaz trade and the Wilpons not wanting Diaz to go to Philly.
Yeah.
And, the somewhat debacle that ensued. I'm not going to get Mike started on the Diaz Cano trade because then we'll be here all night if I get that train going.
Yes, we will.
So I'm going to try and shift this a little bit.
Please do.
Of course.
I will ask more DeGrom questions.
Yeah, I know. Mike's also executive editor over at Mets Minors. Prospects within the Mets system have become a much larger topic the last handful of years, with just the system getting better, the 2 first-round picks last year, and the emergence of guys like a Brett Beatty and a Francisco Alvarez. Mike, what's your read? What's your outlook on the system right now, heading into what's probably might be a trading season this winter?
I think obviously it's a little top heavy when you have guys like Alvarez, Beatty, and Vientos all close to the majors, and then you can throw Mauricio into that group too because he'll start in AAA. And then it kind of, once you get into Binghamton, Brooklyn, position player wise, it gets light. And then you get into where the Mets, I think, did well in their draft last year to get Kevin Parada and Jet Williams. You got 2 first rounds. I mean, those are guys that could have easily gone in the top 10, both of them. To be able to get 2 of those guys in the same draft, a catcher and a shortstop, I think that was great from them. That certainly gave them a little more depth in their top 10. It wasn't just you get to like Mauricio or Vientos and it just falls off, which it kind of did. I mean, you could have looked at some lists early last year that had guys like Khalil Lee and Nick Plummer rounding out the top 10. And now you're talking about Blade Tidwell, Jet Williams, Calvin Ziegler. I mean, kind of different arms. I think the top 10 is definitely better than it was to start the year. And it wasn't just drafting guys. Some other guys played well. And then I think kind of the long-term guys, you're looking at some of the guys that they signed internationally the last couple of years that have kind of popped out of nowhere. Like a Joelmy Ramirez, Linus Alvarez, Joel Diaz.
You throw like a Jesus Baez and a Javier Atencio into that group?
Did we lose him?
You didn't move. I couldn't tell if I lost you or not.
Oh, no. All right, so we may have lost Mike.
Let me text him.
Okay. But while we're talking about the minors and while we're trying to figure out Mike's situation,
Please don't
I'll
go
ask-
back into the Grom.
no. I'll keep it minors. I'll keep it on the farm. I'll ask you a question, and then once we figure out with what's going on with Mike, I'll ask him the same question. There's one guy that always interests me when it comes to the Mets minor league system, and it's Ronnie Mauricio. We see the potential in the bat. We see the growth. I mean, his body is starting to fill out. A couple years ago, he was a skinny, frail kid who just happened to lean into a couple homers in there every now and then. Now we see him as someone who's really filled out as a strong kid. You see what he's doing over in the Dominican League, in the winter leagues. He's destroying the baseball, and he's making it look easy. But the problem with him is that he plays shortstop. He has no position with the Mets. We have a guy there who's going to be pretty good for the next decade, hopefully. I don't think you're going to be able to move him. And if you do, you can't move him to third base now because that's blocked by Brett Beatty or even Eduardo Escobar. I view Ryan Mauricio kind of in the same camp as a Mark Vientos, where you could very easily make a very appealing trade package centered around this guy. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's questionable. I admittedly am not the world's biggest Mauricio fan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had 3 things he needs to check off on the list to.
His eye is terrible. I know you're going to go there.
Right. For me, there have been 3 things I need to see from him on a consistent basis. 1, I need the Mets to move him to a new position, and I need to see him get legitimate reps there.
Okay.
To even make a conclusion, even to begin to come to a conclusion.
Okay.
On what to feel about him in that spot. 2, I need to see the eye. The eye needs to develop, like you said. 3, I've needed to see him fill out and hit for more power. He's definitely done that. He is hitting big boy home runs.
Yeah.
He's a
beefy boy. And look, I'm not saying beefy in like a bad way. He's a muscular
strong
dude.
Built man.
Yeah. He is a muscular dude.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best way to put it. He's a strong, muscular dude.
Yeah.
So the power started to come. He's still young. I'm hopeful the eye can come in time.
How old is he?
I want to say 22.
Like still got time to develop too.
I try not to give up on prospects until they're 24.
I think that's fair because isn't that when they lose their prospect status anyway? Once they turn 25.
It's Ronnie's 21. Socially, yes. Like 24, 25 is really the last time.
Mm-hmm.
Really is the last time that guys are able to get in. I think
fans kind of give a negative misconception of, because like you see the J-Rods, the Juan Sotos, all these guys coming up at 20, in some cases 18, 19 years old, and they're automatically taking over the league. But sometimes players need a little bit more time to develop. I mean, look, Pete Alonso was called up at 25, and he's already one of the best power hitters in baseball and probably a top 5 first baseman in the game. Sometimes players need a little bit more time to fully develop and fully round out their game. Maybe Mauricio's not called up until he's 23, 24. But if that's what it takes for him to figure out what position he's playing, how to properly play defense, how to, not swing at the curveball in the dirt on a 1-2 pitch, maybe that's the case. But
and I think
for the high ceiling guys, you have to give time.
And it's also just he's been at this for a while. And he's been in the Mets system for a while. And I think it's what happens. You have a lot of these international free agent guys that get into the Dominican leagues and the Florida Complex League at 17, 18. Ronnie's been at this like 3, 4, 5 years in the Mets system.
Right.
So I'm sure if you ask most fans, you wouldn't think he's still 21.
Right.
He's still a kid. He's younger than Brett Beatty, I believe. He's definitely younger than a Vientos. He's probably around the same age as Kevin Parada.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think there's still reason to hold out hope. And the Mets are changing things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new hitting infrastructure in place, a new minor league hitting coordinator, a new hitting coordinator for the organization as a whole, new hitting coach. There are changes that are being made.
Yeah.
And I think guys like Ronnie, you want to see the results here. You want to see if the Mets can figure it out. If the Mets can figure it out with a guy like Ronnie and just go from there.
So you were saying that you want to move to a different position. Where do you want to see him go?
I think he can be a corner outfielder. I think he has the build for it.
Is he a speed guy? I don't know how fast.
He's fast enough on his feet. He is range.
Okay. Okay.
He's range. The hands have always been a question as long as just the fundamentals of it.
Right.
But I think he definitely has range. He's got the legs. And
Definitely got the legs.
I think you
Christ.
think that he's 21. You can teach him. You can teach these things.
Yeah. At that age, you can absolutely learn a different position. All right. Well, welcome back. Apologize. Obviously, we're all wearing different outfits here. Some technical issues yesterday. Call dropped, so we're back with Jack and Mike. So the only news that we really missed from yesterday is that Zach Eflin is now at Tampa Bay Ray, 3 years, 39 million, 3 years, 40 million, whatever it was. But that's neither here nor there. We were talking prospects at all, so that was Jack's question. So I'll hand it back off to him.
Yeah, thanks, man. Mike, I was just asking you for your kind of general feel of where the farm system is right now. The farm system got a lot of attention last year with Beatty, Alvarez, and Vientos all having huge years and then all reaching the bigs, the 2 first-round picks. Just kind of want to get what your pulse is on the system right now.
Yeah, and I started to talk about before the main internet gave out on me last night. Yeah, I mean, it started out this year pretty top heavy with the guys you mentioned and some other guys. Like you said, we saw all of those guys. Well, we'll see them all again in 2023, assuming they're all here. But I think beyond those 3 guys, there's some more depth to the entire system now. I think it gets deeper into the top 10 itself is deeper. The start of the year, there's guys like Khalil Lee and Nick Plummer that were kind of rounding out the Mets top 10. Neither of them had good years, but I mean, even them with having good years, it's obviously better that you have guys like Blade Tidwell, the Mets second round pick from this year, first round talent. It's obviously better for your system when you have a guy of that talent kind of rounding out your top 10. And I think it's better in the lower levels too, because the Mets did a good job of developing some really young pitching that Jack got to see a little bit of it in St. Lucie, where they won the championship from last year's draftees to at the end of the year, it was international signees that were kind of flashing what they have with Joelmy Ramirez, Leno Avales, Javier Atencio, and Yoel Diaz. I mean, even Diaz had a great outing in the playoffs, 6 shutout innings with 10 strikeouts. You can argue that he's in the top. To start the year, he would have been a guy that was probably 7 or 8 with what he's done, and right now he's probably 12 or 13th, and that's after a really good finish to the season for Diaz. He was only 18. Atencio pitched most of the season at 20. Ramirez, who won pitcher of the year in the FCL, pitched the year at 20. Talking about Avales, he's only 19. So we're talking about the Mets finally have some young pitching, and that really deepens their system as a whole. This is a system for 3 or 4 years that after you get after the top 7 guys, it took a pretty big drop off. And then again, after you got through the 15 or 16 prospects, it took another jump again. And them developing some of these younger pitchers, it really lengthens the farm system. And that's without talking about, St. Lucie also had some young hitters that Jack got to see too, with William Lugo, Junior Tillian,
Consuegra.
Consuegra, Ramirez to start the year. These are all top 30 guys, and Ramirez is obviously a top 100 guy in baseball. There's a lot of talent that came through St. Lucie, and that's a good sign for the Mets, because some of those guys will be in St. Lucie again, and then some will be in Brooklyn this year. But the Mets their weak spot right now is pretty much that in between. You have Ramirez, Beatty, Vientos, Bryce Montes de Oca, Jose Buto. Those guys are all basically major league ready or on the verge of being major league ready. And then you have the younger guys I just mentioned. The in between is kind of the weak spot in the Mets system right now, is they really don't have anything in AA, any high upside there. And if a lot of the prospects we're talking about start in the majors, the AAA team is kind of beyond that, lacking, especially in the pitching department, beyond Buto and Bryce Montes Dioka, there's not a ton of major league prospects that you're going to see pitching in AA or AAA this year.
You bring up Diaz's great game in the playoffs, I believe it was. I think it was the semifinals for St. Lucie. I remember seeing him in May, right after they promoted Vassell and Diaz. I think I said Budo. Diaz's great playoff game, and Diaz then pitching in early, I think late May, early June in St. Lucie, and he looked lost. It was a little ugly at times. Couldn't find the strike zone. The curve still looked good. El Yo-Yo as he calls it, still looked good, but it just watching him, it was tough. And you fell for him. A 19-year-old kid, like around the same age as me. But then from that to the dominant performance he has at the end of the year, I think that's probably a strong testament to the infrastructure the Mets have in place. And Antonio's probably sick of hearing me talking about the infrastructure the Mets are trying to build, but I think it's a strong testament to it. And so my follow-up will be, you mentioned kind of the in-between, Brooklyn, Binghamton. I think that's where we're going to find a lot of interesting arms for the Mets this year. And interesting in the sense of, I don't entirely know what to think of them. I know we've talked about it before with some of our other friends and some of our other colleagues. The guys like Calvin Ziegler, Dominic Hamill, Mike Vassell, where we would have seen guys like Nick Zwack and Carson Seymour, like that range of arms for the Mets. What do you really make of that group? Because I think you can talk to people where you see maybe multiple guys with major league starter potential. You talk to some others who doesn't see a single major league starter there.
Yeah, I do think it's kind of a preference thing, and how they think they're going to develop. I think a lot of guys, people I talk to in the Mets organization definitely think out of Ziegler, Hamill, Vassell, Askew, Christian Scott. You're talking about, they all think those guys have a chance to be starters. Outside, I think scouts from outside the organization a little more harsh. I don't think Askew and people I talk to, he ends up being a bullpen arm for sure. He's just not a starter in the big leagues. Other guys that we talked about, Hamill, it's a command issue with Hamill. He's just, he has some good starts where he'll get in a groove and he's clicking and he'll be fine. And he did towards the end of the season. Again, there was a guy that showed progression, but he's inconsistent with his command. Yeah, he did. And then on the flip side, Ziegler kind of fell off the table. He had a really great start for St. Lucie, had some injury issues, and then when he came back, he was a different pitcher when he came back. And Vassell kind of pitched all the way through the year, looked good, went to the Arizona Fall League and pitched pretty well. I do think they get a couple of starters out of those guys. I don't think there's any like ace potential out of any of those arms. But I think Ziegler, if he can kind of, you're not going to change his mechanics because of his unusual kind of how he delivers, kind of how he goes back. You're not going to change any of that, but what you want to do is kind of simplify it, and so you can get him throwing more strikes. Kind of with Hamill too. I think Hamill kind of gets into a spot where he's trying to throw a bunch of different pitches and doesn't really get a focused idea of what he's doing on the mound. And that'll just come with pitching and working with guys in the Mets system. I think of that group, the crazy thing is of that group, you're talking about Ziegler, Hamill, and Vassell. Obviously, Ziegler's the higher pick and Vassell's the lowest pick. There's people within the Mets and people outside the Mets organization that tell you they would prefer Vassell of that group. And they think that he's actually the better prospect of that group, which on the surface of talking about where they're picked seems kind of crazy and how Vassell pitched in college. But Vassell was, he was a first-round guy, a potential first-round guy coming out of high school.
Yep, in Massachusetts.
So it's just kind of a matter of him getting healthy. The Mets have already found a couple extra ticks by a couple of subtle changes in his delivery. I think you talk about just like a prototypical pitcher body. You just look at Mike Vassell and it's like, this guy's going to be a horse. Like he can go 200 innings, which is obviously, that's pretty extensive nowadays. I think I would lean. I think Vassell right now is probably the safest of those guys. Like he's the guy I would say he's definitely going to be a starter in the big leagues with Hamill and Ziegler. They obviously have the higher upside, but I think there's potential for both of those guys not to end up in the big leagues either.
So I'll ask you a quick follow up to that. To throw Tidwell into that group, would you take Tidwell over Vassell?
Yeah, I think there's just too much upside. I think his stuff, his fastball slider, both of those are just a tick better than Vassell. And plus, I think there's a little bit of a unknown with Tidwell too, is just getting to see him in a healthy stretch. I mean, for the Mets, what did we see? Even with the playoffs, I think we saw a total of like 20 innings, 20-ish innings.
Basically, an active roster rehab. It felt like, they very much kind of cautiously walked him into innings. It felt like.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the regular season, and then they kind of took the leash off a little bit in the postseason, and he looked better. And I mean, he got up to 5 innings in a start in the postseason. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you can make an argument that Tidwell's the best prospect of that group.
Best name in the class too, Blade Tidwell. I mean, come on, that's a name set for the big leagues. I'm going to fire off a two-parter for you if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
The first one I want to center around Alex Ramirez. This is the guy that kind of I've heard of the name, but I didn't really lock in onto him until Jack brought him up to me. So I saw the talent, the upside, and just the numbers that he was putting up. We've seen, especially in the Braves case, they've seen a lot of success from calling up guys from Double A, and they're having instant success. They have Michael Harris, Vaughn Grissom, a couple of the guys that they've done it with. I think they did it with Ozzie Albies as well. Is he a guy that you could see the Mets calling up from Double A if, let's just say, they don't land a center fielder? I'm not saying maybe this year, but at some point in the near future where he goes to Double A, has some quick success. Is that a guy where he might be able to come up right away and help this team out? And secondly, we've seen guys, especially with Beatty and Alvarez, come up, have little splashes, a little cup of coffee with the team. Beatty got hurt, and Alvarez, they're just the end of the season. Are those two guys that the Mets see as everyday contributors to the Mets in 2023?
So first with the Ramirez, I would say that's a pretty firm no. Ramirez to me is more of a developmental, not challenges in the word I want to use, but he's still a project. I would say. Yeah, he's not refined on any of his tools, quite honestly. Even his defense, which is one of his selling tools when he was younger, before he started kind of hitting a little bit, his defense still needs work. I think for me, his tool right now is just average on defense. And hitting, I think his swing got smoother as the year went on. I think the Mets kind of worked with him. He's at the start of the year, even when he was hitting well, he'd tend to loop his swing quite frequently and pretty strongly. And he didn't pull the ball at all. And at some point, once you're getting up against better pitching, you're going to have the ability to pull the ball to become even an upper level minor leaguer. There's a ton of upside there. I know, like before the year, Keith Law had Alex Ramirez as in his top 100, and everyone was like, "Oh wow, that's kind of a shock." And then Ramirez had a pretty darn good year, and now he's in everyone's top 100. I'm not trying to take anything away from Ramirez. I just think he's a guy that this year he'll start in Brooklyn and he'll play probably a good portion of the year in Brooklyn, and then assuming he's hitting well, then he'll go up to Binghamton, finish the year off in Binghamton, and then kind of do the same thing. I just don't think he's one of those guys that's going to take any major leaps unless there's some big change in spring training this year. That's kind of where you see some of these changes. I mean, that's where we saw it with Alvarez. I mean, Alvarez just came into spring training this year and was like, I'm going to make the big leagues, and had just worked his ass off all offseason and improved his defense, fine-tuned his offense, and he was a monster. So, I mean, anything can happen, but I would say no. Right now, Ramirez is not the guy that's going to make a jump from Double A. And then with Beatty and Alvarez, I mean, for me, Alvarez should be on the Mets opening day roster. That we're speaking just talent. and how good he is compared to James McCann, Tomas Nido. Obviously, there's some roster issues there you would have to figure out. You don't want to carry 3 catchers. You shouldn't carry 3 catchers, even with 26 guys. It just, there's not much you can do with the roster, especially when you're going to have a guy like Vogelback, who is essentially a DH only guy. But yeah, I think Alvarez is at the point where he just needs to hit in the big leagues. You have the DH, so use that too, to get him at bats. And honestly, I think Beatty's right there. I really liked what I saw from Beatty, even at the major league level. I know just like the raw stats of the average on base percentage, all that stuff, it doesn't paint you a good picture, but he hit the ball hard.
Yeah.
If you go look at his exit velocity, it was impressive what he did. And I mean, we're not like being just nerds at looking at exit velocity. He put good swings on those balls.
He can be.
Yeah.
If you want to be, it's no problem.
They're
Don't tell
competitive at
Jeff.
bats. That's another thing.
Don't tell Jeff Bagwell, but if you want to be, no.
But yeah, and I think, I mean, probably the weak spot right now is Beatty's defense. And for me, I still don't think that's a big hindrance. I think he's a guy that at worst case scenario is going to give you a similar defensive value that Escobar did for the Mets this year. I mean, Escobar wasn't particularly good defensively this year. He was slightly below average. And I think that could be right where Beatty is. And the big question is, what are you getting out of Escobar? Are you getting the first 4 months of Eduardo Escobar, or are you getting the last month and a half? And that'll all kind of play out in the next month once we see what the Mets do. I mean, so many things, things can happen. Like if they are able to re-sign Nimmo, maybe they're more comfortable with Alvarez behind the dish and Beatty at third base with Escobar being a middle infielder. If they aren't able to sign Nimmo, maybe they kind of have to sign a guy that can play the infield and move McNeil to the outfield. So it kind of depends on a bunch of things, but Alvarez should be there on opening day. And I think Beatty's there a little bit after.
Do you think Escobar is at this point, it kind of all depends on what the Mets think of Brett Beatty. Do you think Escobar and even if McCann are trade chips at this point? Because they're trying to, because like you said, you don't want to carry 3 catchers on your opening day roster. So you want to clear out McCann, clear out some salary cap from there. And then the same thing with Escobar. You have Beatty there. If you want him playing every day, it's kind of tough to justify carrying Eduardo Escobar on the roster as well. So you clear out $10 million. Maybe that helps re-signing Jacob deGrom or Brandon Nimmo or what have you. Is that a possibility where trading Eduardo Escobar or James McCann this offseason?
I think the Mets would salivate at the possibility of trading James McCann.
Yeah.
Good luck finding someone who wants, because that's a backloaded deal too. He's making $12 million over the next 2 years, each of the next 2 years.
Right.
So I just don't think you find anyone for James McCann. If you do, you're taking another bad contract somewhere else at a different position. And maybe the Mets are willing to do that for a pitcher if they miss out on a couple of guys. Escobar, I think Escobar is the type of guy that you keep around. I think that kind of gives you insurance in case Beatty falls on his face, and also gives you some infield depth. I mean, we saw at times last year with like Devin Marrero and Yolmer Sanchez and Travis Blankenhorn.
Go Suki Kato.
Exactly. I mean, those type of guys that were on the roster. So I think Escobar is the type of guy, the veteran guy, that he would be fine off the bench too.
Clubhouse loved him too. You could tell.
Yeah, the clubhouse loved him. Fine off the bench. He could be a pretty good pinch hitter. And I think, I mean, he gives you another option off as a DH too. So, and who knows what's going to really end up with that spot. We talk about Vogelback, and I mean, Darren Ruff's still on the roster too. So, but yeah, I think you keep Escobar around just because that is a pretty cheap deal for the Mets aspect. I mean, a lot of teams can't afford to pay a bench guy that much money, but I think you can with the Mets.
And you bring up all those, we'll call them crummy infielders the Mets played last year. Like, it ties into your previous point of the lack of upper level depth, the major league ready depth that you have in double A, triple A. You're at the point where you're playing, the likes of those guys, which is brutal to say the least.
It's not what you want.
No.
No, and I mean it's where they got into a spot where they had to start Buto in a game where they liked Buto, but they didn't. I mean, he wasn't ready for that spot start.
Probably the
As a
worst
major league
ballpark to do
caliber
it in.
pitcher.
They won the game.
Yeah, and they did. But also talking about
Somehow.
that game and that series, you also had guys that weren't major league pitchers coming out of the Mets bullpen seemingly every time Buck went to the bullpen. So that kind of talks to the depth again. And
Yeah, how's that run of
it's
their picking a new 40 guy in the 40 man every day?
That was ridiculous.
yeah. Well, and I mean
Sam Clay, RJ Alvarez.
It'll be tough for it not to be kind of the same thing in the bullpen for the Mets or in pitching for the Mets this year, because I mean, right now their bullpen consists of Edwin Diaz, Drew Smith, and then Bryce Montez Dioca, and then who knows?
Well,
So
do you think
you can only sign so many free agents?
Yeah.
Do you think some of those waiver claims and lower level trades, specifically the four guys, Eliezer Hernandez, Jeff Brigham, I think his name is Alex Woods, and Steven Ridings, do you think those guys kind of help alleviate the situations like where you're going through a different, not exactly major league reliever every day?
I mean, to a degree, because essentially those guys are kind of replacing like your Yohan Lopez, your Odonis Medinas, Trevor Williams, those types.
I'll miss him.
I think Brigham is a quality big league arm, assuming he stays healthy. I think there's a ton of upside with Steven Ridings.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's obviously got a big arm, and two pretty good pitches, major league pitches. So if he can stay healthy, that's where the upside is.
Remember
William Woods
Harris giving praise to Hernandez as well for his stuff plus.
Yeah, I think Hernandez is more of a pitch selection issue. He was throwing way too much of his four-seam fastball, which
you're a big pitch selection guy.
Yeah, a pitch select. So if that's something the Mets can look at and kind of change up, and that's also mostly him as a starter too. So
right,
if you can slide him into, I know a lot of people have mentioned sliding him into the Trevor Williams role, which is essentially a bulk innings reliever. Yeah, I think he'd be fine there. And like you said, I mean, that they did a good job of, in kind of a weird part of the offseason where teams are essentially mostly getting rid of players off their 40 to make room for prospects. The Mets were actually able to grab some depth from other teams. And I would say that group of guys is better than the group of Odonis Medina,
Yohan Lopez.
Pick your Nate Fisher, pick other names, Sam Clay, pick other names out of a hat. I'd say they did improve that depth part, to your point, Jack.
I'm going to give you an opportunity that I gave Tom Tanos in early 2021. I asked him to give me a sleeper prospect breakout type guy, and he told me to watch out for the big curveball of Tyler McGill. Turned out unsurprisingly, he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, he was right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd hope so. So I'm going to ask you to give me a sleeper prospect coming into this year, and a guy who can break out and a guy who can make a major league impact. Well, those last two are the same.
Well, I'm going to kind of heat on this a little bit just because I typically don't pick any, I don't pick any of these guys until I see them in spring training. Because like I talked about, there's so many different things that can happen over the winter and then spring training once they get into the group with the Mets have new director of hitting and pitching. So in the minor leagues, so those guys tinkering with them will kind of change some stuff. I think he already kind of broke out a little bit. Just to talk about one guy I like a lot is Consuegra. I talked about him a lot.
Jack's guy right there.
What I'm
He's got
talking
some nuts
about
power.
now is the fact that when I saw him last year in minor league spring training, he was kind of the guy that flew off the page. Like, he was the one making loud contact all the time. It didn't matter if it was outs, home runs, whatever it was. He was the one making consistent loud contact. So yeah, I'll kind of push that off, and then we'll have me back on in March, and then I'll make my choices.
All right.
I had a feeling
We'll
this.
hold you to that.
I had a feeling you might have gone down that path, so I had a backup question. Because a guy I think could have a huge breakout year for the Mets in a sense of major league impact. You know, we thinking of a guy who's not exactly a well-known prospect, but can still make an impact. For me, it's Grant Hartwig, UDFA out of Miami in Ohio. Just wanted to get your quick thoughts on Hartwig, and since in my opinion he's a guy who can put up some big innings for the Mets out of the bullpen next year.
No, yeah, I think that's a good point. As someone, I mean, that most Mets fans going into the season will have no clue who is, and could very well end up pitching in their bullpen at some point. Yeah, I mean, the guy started the year at Brooklyn and finished the year in Syracuse. I mean, he pitched through all the levels essentially, and
He
I got
got
to
St.
see
Lucie
him.
innings too. He pitched at
Yeah,
every
St.
level,
Lucie innings. Yeah, he did. So he
Wow.
pitched at every full season level.
and he got better
Um,
each one he went up.
Yeah, and it was as an undrafted free agent. This wasn't like a first round pick where they're like, "Hey, he's pitching really well. We want to see him." But I think that kind of gave him an advantage of being an undrafted free agent. Where, I mean, the Mets don't have a lot invested in him, and he just pitched really good. So just keep pushing him up the ladder until he hits a wall, and he just never did. Um, as far as stuff, I mean, it's a fastball 95, 96 that he just shows really good command of. And it's a slider, a sharp little slider that, again, it's really good command of. Both of those pitches are good late movement. He hides the ball pretty well, so it's tough to pick up. Yeah, I think he's a guy that's going to get a invite to big league camp, so that'll give the Mets a better look to see what he has. But yeah, if you had to pick a guy that like Mets fans likely don't know that's going to pitch big leagues innings next year, I think Hartwig's probably at the top of that list.
Last question I'll ask you. This is the last one I have. I think Antonio has one more. You mentioned new pitcher, new director of pitching, new director of hitting. You know, there have been coaching staff changes. Yep. Billy Epler alluded to the fact during his press conference. He said that the announcement isn't coming yet because they might not be done with changes on the staff. What are your impressions of the recent changes the Mets have made?
I would say, in my opinion, and the people I talk to in baseball, the additions of Albert Yeagers as the hitting and pitching coach or development,
Yeah.
yeah, in the minor leagues. I haven't heard a bad word about either of them, and from my perspective, I think that's a great move. I think the Mets continue to move into. I mean, we've seen it with Ben Sosmer and him just growing the Mets analytic group seemingly by the week. And you got a guy, Yeagers, that came from Driveline, and Albert, who was credited with modernizing the Cardinals' hitting philosophy. So, I mean, just on the surface, that seems like good ads for the Mets. And I've talked to some people that have worked, Mets minor leaguers that have already worked with Yeagers at Driveline, and they've had nothing but good things to say about not only his knowledge of analytics, Repsodo, anything that has to do with modern pitching, but how he's able to kind of get that information to the players in a way that any player, maybe you say you have a player that's not into analytics or doesn't have that type of knowledge, he can really make sure that he communicates that. And I think that's essentially where we are in baseball now, because every team has their own form of analytics that they're trying to impress on the players for their edge. The real thing is, how are they communicating and getting that player to really take in that information? And I think that's been a struggle for the Mets, in part because they've just had no continuity at the minor league level in any of their pitching or hitting departments, just because they've had a couple of different regime changes, GM changes. So I think both those guys are good hires. I think this Epler will finally get a chance to just have those guys in those situations for a couple years to help it all trickle down all the way through the minor leagues. And then onto the major league level, I think Chavez was always going to end up being the Mets bench coach. I think that was always what was going to happen. And hitting coach was kind of one of those things to just get him in the mindset of coaching, because he hadn't coached at all. So that just felt like an easy transition for him. And Sherlock always felt like a guy that was kind of just there as Buck's buddy. And it was late in the off season. Let's bring in Glenn Sherlock. He's familiar with the Mets. He's Buck's buddy.
I won't take the Rollins College alumni slander.
He can be the old guy that stands in the corner and but no, I mean, credit Sherlock. The Mets went to him. They told him that they essentially needed to move Chavez to hitting coach to the bench coach, and Jeremy Barnes to the hitting coach, because they had to elevate Barnes. Teams are looking at him, thinking about hiring for being the hitting coach. So they had to elevate Barnes to hitting coach. And it was just natural to move Chavez to the bench coach. So Sherlock stays and he gets to work as a catching instructor, which is essentially what he was really hired to do anyway. So I think I don't have a bad word to say, honestly, about any of the moves they've made so far. There's obviously there's a lot of coaches in the minor leagues that aren't returning. So I'll have to see who they fill them with. If Epler kind of reaches out to some old Angels, or he keeps going along in the aspect that he's going. And obviously the Mets will need an assistant hitting coach too at this point. So we'll see who they get there too.
I'll ask one more front office question, then we'll end it off with another major league roster question here. For the past 2 years, 2+ years, it seems like they've been looking for a president of baseball ops. There's rumors about David Stearns. James Click is now available since he's left Houston. Will the Mets hire president of baseball ops, or will they go into 2023 with Billy Epler running the train here?
If I was a betting man, I would say Billy Epler is the guy running the ship this entire offseason. I just think partially, I think Steve Cohen was happy with the job that Epler did overall last year. I don't think he's going to publicly say it, but obviously he's disappointed in how the season ended.
Sure.
And I think part of that disappointment comes with that the Mets didn't do enough at the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Cohen and the Mets didn't see that as enough of a kind of hindrance to what Epler did in the offseason. I mean, you can obviously say that Epler had about as good offseason as you GM can have, and he did it basically being thrown right into the fire.
Yeah, you had a lockout, and then all that happened. Yeah.
So I think Epler is that guy. I do think that next offseason, I have a tough time thinking that the Mets aren't going to entertain bringing Stearns in. And of course, that's all really up to what Stearns wants.
Right.
If you take him at face value and saying that he's kind of stepping down and kind of stepping away from that lead baseball guy, then this isn't a question. And I think Stearns would probably come out and say that pretty early in the offseason, just so there aren't so many rumors swirling around him. But let's say he doesn't. The Mets will still be looking for a president of baseball ops. And it certainly sounds like the Astros don't really care about signing or hiring a real GM, a real president of baseball ops, anyone who's going to be the higher up. Their owner now thinks he's MLB's Jerry Jones.
Yeah,
he's already kind of Jerry Jonesed it. He's got Jeff Bagwell as his wingman out of nowhere. So
tell me you don't dig the soul patch, man.
No, I don't dig it at all. But yeah, I think right now, and just from like talking to Mets people in the Mets organization, I haven't heard anything about them actually searching for
Wow.
anyone this offseason at all. I know they're still looking for someone on the business side, but
Team president.
that's really, that's really a completely different animal than a president of baseball ops. So I'm not sure I agree with Billy Epler being the sole guy.
Okay.
But I think that's what we're going to see. Especially this late. If they were going to do something, I think they would have had to have done it about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
So on a 1 to 10, just a quick last one for me. I know I already said I had a last one. So on a 1 to 10, what's your level of confidence in Billy Epler going into this winter? Because I think you've told me before that this is probably the most important offseason in team history.
Yeah, you look at other off seasons and just where the Mets were at that time. I mean, the Mets are coming off winning 101 wins and it being a completely disappointing season, right? Like that's where we're at. I think that's the general feeling, and I think that's the feeling from Steve Cohen. So it's a tough one because he had a good offseason. I didn't like his deadline at all, and that's not hindsight. I said at the time that I didn't like his deadline. I liked the Vogelback move, but it just, I mean, that simply just wasn't enough. Rough. I didn't like the rough move at the time, and it just got worse as the days went. And Givens, while the Mets didn't give up much, and he ended up pitching all right for them, that just wasn't enough either. They need another bullpen arm, and I felt like they should have got another hitter beyond the capabilities of Ruff.
I know you didn't like the Naquin trade.
No, they gave up way too much for Naquin, and after a hot 7 to 10 games, Naquin went.
He had the
back to
2-homer
being
game, and that was
Tyler Naquin. Yeah, so I just thought instead of piecemealing an offensive player, they really should have just gotten 1 or 2 good offensive players. But yeah, I'm kind of long-winding this answer here. Because I know I'll go with a 6.
Okay.
That's my final answer. I just there's not enough of a track record for Billy Epler, especially in a big market, in a big situation like this, to have any more confidence than that for me.
Sounds like cautiously optimistic.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's honestly
very cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. I would say I could go lower, but I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic.
I appreciate that.
The gut reaction was a 3.
Yeah.
Well, and I think part of my optimism has to do with the fact that what I talked about with Sosmer and the fact that the Mets now have one of the biggest analytic teams in baseball. I think he can kind of lean on those guys to help him with these type of decisions and to kind of find some diamonds in the rough. And that's what they're going to have to do, particularly with the bullpen, is they're going to have to find 2 or 3 arms out of nowhere. They're going to have to pitch 40 to 50 quality innings.
All right. So now we'll end it off with you. We appreciate all the time that you've given. Final thing here. As you saw yesterday, Jack was wearing a Christmas hat. So when our call dropped, we continued on. And one of the things we gave was
it's still right here.
There it is. Yeah. Pop it back on real quick. We gave our wish lists for the Mets in 2023. We gave 5 things. We're not going to make you give 5. Give us a list of 3. Oh, you're going to 1, 3, 2.
Happy mediums 2.
A top 2 on your wish list for the Mets in 2023.
Of people that they should add?
It could be people to add. It could be trade pieces. I said never have a live DJ in Citi Field ever again. So it could be whatever you want. Just a wish list for the Mets in 2023.
I would say Brandon Nimmo and Shohei Ohtani.
Oh, I know that. Think of that.
I know the Angels have said that they're not going to trade him, but it doesn't make sense not to trade him.
Right.
If I was Billy Epler, I would literally call their GM, the Angels GM, every single day until he blocked my phone.
Just keep
How's-
calling up
I
Perry.
would just keep
He's
calling
gonna block
Perry.
his number.
Yeah, every day, every hour of every day.
Mm.
And I would say, hey, Perry, you're going to trade him. Let's just get this done before the season starts.
I mean, he did say the phone calls have been constant. He didn't say with who. Maybe he's making the constant phone calls with Perry. So who knows?
Yeah, he did say that today. A constant volume of phone calls. I think how he described it. He has a way with words. I'll give him that much. He doesn't have
Yeah.
Sandy's sense of humor, but he has a way with words.
All right, Jack, you have anything else?
No, I think we stretched this out over 25 hours.
Yeah, we sure did.
I think
All
it's a
right.
great
Well,
place for me.
I mean, listen, we appreciate your time coming on here. We appreciate your time coming back on here a second time. Yeah, I mean, this a lot of good stuff, a lot of good information. Appreciate your time. Anything else? Any final words?
No, not at all. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah,
we'll take you up on that offer in March to come back.
Yeah, we'll
on
see you
and
back here in March.
Give a sleeper prospect.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all we have for this one. It's Antonio Slater, it's Jack Ramsey, and the mayor of Mets Twitter. And as always, LFGM.
To make the pain a little less for you, I'm wearing a Santa hat.
You are. I was about to transition into this.
It's not even December yet, and I'm
No, it's
waiting for
not.
Mike to let me know if he can.
3
hop back
hours
on.
away.
So, I figured in the spirit of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all the deals, everything. Mets wish lists.
I like it.
Everyone can give. We can both give 5.
5.
I've got one in my head. Well, they got like 8 open 40-man spots.
Yeah, you know what? And that's honestly, I like that they kept those spots open. Because to me, that's sending a message that they're going to be making some moves. They're going to be busy. So and that's not going to be big names. It's not going to be all. It's not saying with those numbers, with those roster spots, it's going to be DeGrom, Rodon, Verlander. I'm not saying that. You have to fill out some depth pieces as well, but neither here nor there. So I'll let you go first.
I would also say I expect them to be busy at the Rule 5 draft. I would expect them to bring in at the minimum 1 arm. I'm pretty confident in saying that.
Okay.
So my Mets wish list.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start with number 1 in Carlos Rodon.
Okay.
I think Rodon's an ideal fit.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can. I don't love just labeling guys as, they're always injured. They're always like, that's just sports today. Guys get hurt at a far more frequent clip than ever before.
Absolutely.
So shut up about that.
Mm-hmm.
Nasty, dominating, hard throwing lefty. He's like probably only a couple years into his prime. Carlos Rodon. 2 is Brandon Nimmo.
Okay.
Self-explanatory.
Absolutely.
For number 3, and this is going to break your heart, but I mean it in the nicest, the most loving way possible. Flip Eduardo Escobar for a reliever.
Yeah, that kills me.
I know. And I know you love Paul.
I love him.
But the Mets, the Mets need to give Alvarez or need to give Beatty some run, plain and simple. Yeah. You're not going to know what you get from this kid if you're giving 90 starts and 400, 350 at-bats.
Yeah.
Let him play a 162. You gotta. And that leads me into 4. Ship James McCann to Siberia. Just.
Yeah.
Mets needs to just wash their hands with that, take it on whenever it is. If they think that's too much dead money, just look at the Broncos. Look what would happen if they cut Russell Wilson. So just wash your hands.
Listen, I was going to try to avoid any Broncos talk just because I don't want to kick a horse while he's down.
Oh, funny. Kick a horse while he's down, you dick.
The cut Russell Wilson talk is ridiculous.
I can't even get into that right now.
It's so stupid.
I'll start. You'll see the angry New England Italian come out and start yelling.
It is so dumb.
It's just
that
stupid.
People are saying they should cut Russell Wilson after 12 games. We said it before we started recording because we got sidetracked as we always do. Before this year, Russell Wilson was a Hall of Famer. He could have retired before week 1 and just gone right to the Hall of Fame. Okay. That's that. He's not going anywhere. They're not trading him. They're not cutting him. And ultimately, I think the Broncos are going to be fine next year. They just don't have a coach.
They'll figure it out. No,
They'll
they
figure
won't,
like
but they'll figure
I'm
it
not
out.
worried about the Broncos next year.
Let me
But-
get back to my list.
But back to baseball. Number 4.
Number 4 was ship James McCann to Siberia.
Correct.
Right. So you gotta, same way you gotta give Beatty extensive run. And I'd love to ask Mike this question when he comes back on, if he can come back on. We'll see what's happening with the Wi-Fi. But you got to give Alvarez some run. It seems like they're gearing this new role for Glenn Sherlock specifically, and we'll get into the coaching moves in a minute. But specifically, it seems like his goal is to make Francisco Alvarez a defensive catcher. I mean, that's my honest read on it. They need someone to work on that with Alvarez. If there's one thing that's going to keep him from being a top 2 catcher in this game, and by top 2, I don't mean number 2. If there's one thing keeping him from that will keep him from that, it's the defense.
For sure.
So I think that's something they're going to have to figure out.
Yeah. And I think that's why we didn't see him get called up until he did. I mean, granted, he had some injury issues last year that missed a couple games here and there, but ultimately, the bat's there. The bat's there. From the little bit we saw,
the bat's been there since he was in St. Lucie.
The bat's been there since he was 12. It's just a matter of, can he call a good game? Can he throw accurately? Can he block the plate? Those have been the big things. It's all defensively that's kind of held him back. And we say held him back like he's 27. He's 20 years old. He just turned 21, I think. So I think the organization has put a great amount of effort turning him into a better defensive catcher. And from the reports that I've read, and just from what we've seen, the arm is there. He's got a rocket. It's just, can he be more accurate with it? And it's just the framing, which is going to go out the window in a couple of years, probably anyway. And, blocking, and I think he'll get there. I think with the amount of effort they're putting into this kid, he's going to get there. The kid's going to be an absolute maniac of us. He's going to be so good. But yeah, it's a solid 5.
I didn't get my number 5 yet.
I thought Alvarez was
4
5.
4 was McCann Alvarez.
Oh, McCann Alvarez was.
Yeah. Same way Escobar Beatty is. For number 5, I want them to get creative with the bullpen. And I'll give you one example. Look at the Dodgers and Shelby Miller. Shelby Miller, he of losing damn near 20 games with an ERA damn near under 3. Shelby Miller, before last year, I don't think he'd been in the bigs in about 2 to 3 years. But he came up in his Stuff Plus, tracked by Saris and Fangraphs. His Stuff Plus was insane. The Dodgers helped him refine the pitches that made him. The Mets need to become that. They can be in a spot where Eliezer Hernandez, Jeff Brigham, Stephen Ridings, I think the guy was Alex Wood, whoever, where these guys can refine what they have and can find what makes them a legitimate major league reliever. Because the fact of the matter is, the Mets, who claim they want to build a sustainable winner, the last couple of years have been, pretty good in helping these older relievers find something.
Shelby Miller in the past 2 years combined, he was with the Giants for 7 innings last year, and he was with 3 teams in 2021. Did not know that. 19 and 2/3 innings in the past 2 years with a ERA of 8.24. It's a small sample, but it's not great.
And it's not like the Dodgers just kind of give out major league guaranteed contracts.
No, listen, if the Dodgers are signing you, you're showing something.
The Mets need to become that team, to become a team with that type of infrastructure. And I think they've done it with helping older, kind of veteran guys. Miguel Castro was great for them. Sucks with the Yankees. Ottavino, Loop. Even Edwin Diaz, the changes that they have made to their pitching infrastructure in the years Diaz has been here, we've seen a dramatic change for Edwin. But really, since Jeremy Hefner came on, we've seen Edwin Diaz become the Edwin Diaz that the Mets always thought they'd get.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's $100 million richer.
Yeah. Let me ask you a
So,
question.
what's up?
Let's get crazy. You want to get crazy?
Oh, that really depends.
It's an Edwin Diaz question.
Don't make him a starter.
No. Come on.
All right, just said. Oh, the Reds tried to make Chapman a starter.
Sure. If Edwin Diaz if Edwin Diaz lives out the 5 years of his contract, is he on the path of the Hall of Fame?
I think if Edwin Diaz, I'm gonna backtrack. I think saves are the stupidest stat in baseball.
Okay.
They are right up there with wins and holds.
Wins is a stupid stat. Holds, I don't know if anyone really uses that.
Yeah, holds is something you see in a box score that means nothing.
Right.
I think saves are pretty stupid.
Okay.
I think if Edwin Diaz can amass 400 career saves and the ERA under 3, he is a Hall of Fame,
400 saves.
which I think only 4 other people have ever done.
How many does he have?
Maybe 5. Mariano, Hoffman, Wagner.
Come on, baseball reference. Okay. So Edwin Diaz at 28 has 205 saves.
Figure his prime takes him 6 or 7 more years, 5 or 6 more years. So he's about 34. I think it's possible. But if you're looking at the all-time saves leaders, guys who have hit 400, Wagner, Franco, K-Rod, B. Smith, Hoffman, Rivera. The only other guys who can sniff it. Kimbrel needs 6.
He'll get there.
Jansen needs 9.
He'll get there.
Then we're looking at other guys who were close. Chapman is 315. I don't think Chapman gets 85 more save opportunities.
I hope he doesn't get one more save opportunity.
Mark Melanson's at 262. For some reason, I just love Mark Melanson, but I don't think he's going to push 400.
How many does he have?
262.
No shot in hell.
Like Greg Holland, who made 5 appearances for the Rangers last year,
That ain't gonna happen.
has 220.
That ain't gonna happen.
You have Edwin Diaz at 205.
Again, he's 28. So figure he'll hopefully have at least 5 more really good years. And if he can outlast that contract, I think he probably has, depending on health, 3 years after that.
You figure he probably has 8 or 9 more years in the league.
Yeah.
At a minimum, 5 more years is in the league closer, you hope.
Yeah. And I agree with you that the save category is kind of losing its value. I mean, we even saw this year. He was the closer of the Mets, but there are times where he was pitching in the 7th inning. Because if you got through Trey Turner, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman in the 7th inning with a 4-2 lead, the game's over. Game is done.
I mean, he still saved 32 games this year.
Right, which is probably in top 5 in the National League, if I had to take a guess.
I mean, figure he saves around 30 games a year the next 5 years. He's going to push 400.
He'll push 400.
He might get 400 with someone else.
Yeah.
But he'll push.
But if he has 370 saves and a
But I think also part of it is
2-3 career ERA, he's there.
If the Mets can build a stronger bullpen,
Right.
then I think in the 7th inning, if you're facing, Acuna, Harris, Riley, you don't have to go to Diaz. Because the Mets' problem last year was their bullpen when Diaz, pretty steep drop off Ottavino, pretty steep drop off everyone else.
Right.
If you want to give it tiers, an S tier closer, an A tier reliever, and a bunch of B, C tier guys.
Sure.
But it wasn't
Which is
great.
fine, but that wasn't enough.
Right. And that puts you in a spot where you have to use Diaz in those situations.
Yeah.
And I am very much a fan of using your best reliever in your most important spots.
100%.
I'm a big situational closer guy.
Mm.
But, it's the same as like batting average. Batting average is not an overly important stat, but you still recognize how impressive it is
Still
when a
means
guy
something.
hits 300.
Yeah.
Like you don't hit 300 by accident. You can hit 260 by accident.
Sure.
You can hit 220 by accident when you should have been hitting like 270, 280.
Right.
But you're not hitting 300 by accident.
No.
So I think it's possible. I just think he needs a more extended. I almost want to say like a Mariano level.
Yeah, and I
Peak.
listen. This is obviously a bit of an overreaction. We're talking
But
about
it
a
also
year and a
depends on
half of
Billy Wagner.
dominance.
I think it depends on Billy Wagner.
Okay,
If Billy
he
Wagner
should be
is
in the Hall
able
of
to,
Fame.
right, if Wagner is able to get in, you now have 3 closers in the past 5 years to reach the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And that would be huge for a guy like a Kimbrel, a guy like a Jansen, a guy like Diaz, who are the best closers of their time. Well, Diaz or Kimbrel and what's his face of the years before. They're looking the best closers right now. You're looking at Diaz. You're looking at like a hater.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe over the next couple of years, a Helsley.
Mm-hmm.
But if Wagner gets in, I think you're looking at a much easier pathway for a guy like Kimbrel and a guy like Jansen. Who will probably get to 400 saves.
Right.
And then if you're a guy like a Diaz and you end with 300, 350, but the situational use of closers has changed, you hope the voters adapt with the times.
All right. So now we'll do I have a little live reaction thing, and then I'll give you my wish list. Just because I opened up Twitter and this is the first thing I saw. You know how SNY, they love to do these little
I already
fake a
saw
deal
it and
things.
it's stupid. I already
Which
saw
one?
it and it's stupid.
Which one did you see? The Pittsburgh one?
Zach Gallen.
Yeah.
That's stupid, and I'm gonna tell you why.
So let's just put it all out there first. It was the Mets getting Zach Gallen and Mark Melancon. And I wasn't going to ask, but then you brought up Melancon, so I kind of had to. So Zach Gallen, Mark Melancon for Kevin Parada, Alex Ramirez, and Stanley Consuegra, who are Kevin Parada, the Mets' first-round pick from this past year, and not just 2 of the bigger names and bigger up-and-comers in the Mets system, but 2 of Jack's favorite prospects in the entire league.
Those are the 2 best outfield prospects.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even a question. It's not a question.
Alex Ramirez, Stanley Consuegra. It's stupid for a lot of reasons. Number one being there's like they're not trading Zach Gallen.
They're not trading Zach Gallen.
If anything, Zach Gallen is showing that he's about to peak. He's about to hit his peak. Which for a good starting pitcher is a multi-year peak.
Yeah, and if I were a betting man right now, I'd put my money on Gallen winning Cy Young next year.
I don't hate that. I think I'd pretty confidently say that he'll finish top 10 next year.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
And more confidently, a little less confidently say he could finish top 5 if all goes well. I think he'll absolutely he'll be one of those dark horse candidates coming into the year.
Yeah.
But he showed last year he's getting ready to kind of make himself an ace.
He went like 44 scoreless innings last year or something like that?
Something you don't do that without being an ace.
Right.
You don't do 7 quality starts of scoreless baseball without being an ace. So they're not going to trade him. They're rumored to be in on Xander Bogaerts, which clearly shows they're getting ready to compete. It's the same as when the Mets signed Granderson.
Look, I'm sorry. We've been hearing the same thing for 4 years with the Diamondbacks. They got Greinke. Oh, they're ready to compete. They got Bumgarner. They're ready to compete.
I don't know if that's the case. I think that was more so you need reasons for butts to be in the seats.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe the intention of that was we need these young starters we have to take some mentorship.
Yeah. Plus,
we need some veteran voices.
Bats, man. They got bats.
Maybe they need some veteran voices. And those guys help Zach Gallen turn into what he is today.
Yeah.
So it's definitely possible when you have the payroll flexibility like that. But no, they're really getting ready to hit. You got Corbin Carroll, you got Dalton Varsho, you got what's the
Alec
first baseman's
Thomas
name? You got Alec Thomas getting ready to come up. Then you add a Xander Bogaerts to that, and you factor in that's what the NL West is open.
Mm-hmm.
But the NL West
traded for Kyle Lewis,
right? The NL West that's been a division the last 6-7 years. I think every team out there has made the playoffs in the last 7 years.
Yeah,
because you had Arizona and Colorado play each other in a wild card game. You had the Giants in the division 2 years ago, or I guess last year still. Then the Padres and the Dodgers make it this year. That's a division that has a lot of playoff turnover. The Diamondbacks still have a solid farm system. They'll have a decent pick coming up next year. I'd like Xander there.
Yeah.
I think that's a very Granderson-esque move. Get the piece that you'll need when it's available.
Xander is probably a better player at this point of his career than when Granderson was when he came to the Mets. But I do agree with you in
Same
terms of
principle.
timelines. Yeah,
Yeah, the
100%.
principle. All right, your wish list.
Okay, my one is easy. I'm a legacy guy. You know what I mean? I appreciate those guys that start their career and end their career one organization. If they see that this organization can retire your number, you can go to a Hall of Fame with this organization. That's something that I appreciate and I look for. And obviously, as a fan, this isn't someone that I want to leave this organization. Number one, bring back Jacob deGrom at any cost. Quite frankly, I don't care. If what's it going to take is giving him that fourth year, give him a fourth year. Make it a vesting option. Make it a team option. Make it some sort of, make it work where in 5 years, when he retires, opening day, you're bringing him back and you're retiring his number. That's what needs to happen. You still need to fill out the rotation, whether it be a tie on, a trade for someone.
Is this number 2?
No, it's still all.
Okay. I'll allow it.
Yeah. But first and foremost, winter meetings, whenever it may be, locking Jacob deGrom. Simple as that. Number 2, bring in a bona fide bat. You need a bopper in the middle of this lineup. We've talked about it before. You're muted. Can't hear you.
Damn offseason is the one thing on their wish list.
You cut out. I heard you until wish list. What's up?
You're putting the whole offseason into one place on your wish list.
Listen. I'm going down. I'm scaling down. I'm scaling down.
Bullshit.
This team needs power.
Yes, a lot of it.
I'm not saying go get Aaron Judge. That's not going to happen. You still need to be realistic about it. But you need to create more power because in the make contact and see what happens, the string together 3, 4, 5 hits in a row, that's going to work in the regular season. But as we've seen in the postseason, power wins.
It didn't even always work in the regular season.
Right.
Think of when they loaded the bases against the Cubs twice.
Right.
And with no outs, I think both times.
Look at the last years against the Braves. The Braves scored 100% of their runs from home runs. Every single run was via home run. You need to hit home runs in this league to win now. You have Alonso who's going to hit 35, 40. You have Lindor who's going to hit close to 30. But after that, who are you going to have? We like to think that Alvarez has 25 home potential, but we don't know. Beatty might be able to hit 18 to 20, but we don't know that yet. Marte, when healthy, I think he could probably bop out 20, but he's getting up there in age. As Mike pointed out before, he's 34 now, I think. So he might not be able to have as much power output.
They have potential for power, but there's also a pretty low floor for the power.
Sure.
I mean, Canada could probably pretty easily put up single-digit home runs next year.
Feasibly.
Marte could as well. So you're also banking on guys being healthy.
Right.
I mean, you're the only ones you can really write in for sure. About 10 home runs for McNeil, around 40 for Alonso, around 25 for
Lindor. Yeah.
But
after that, we don't know.
You probably want to average more than a homer a game. So if you're in a spot where you can only pencil in less than 100 homers, you need to try and now find 80, 90 homers.
Right, which is tough. But
I think it's the same way like you look at scores on a basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
If you can pencil in a couple good shooters, that's great. If you need to average 100 points a game and you're only penciling in 40,
right?
Now if you're penciling in 85-ish home runs, 75, 85, you probably want to be hitting around 170, 180 at the minimum.
Yeah.
No, and you hope Alvarez can give you 30 year one.
That'd be fantastic. But
you hope Beatty can give you 15, 20.
Yeah.
But you just don't know.
Yeah. So that's my number 2. Bring in more power. I like what you said. Get creative filling out the bullpen. That's my number 3. Because like I said, in the postseason in October, home runs win and dominant relief pitching wins. one way or another, they're going to have a good starting rotation. I think we all believe that, whether it be DeGrom, Verlander, Rodon, Senga, whatever it may be, they're going to have a good top 3-4 in a rotation. So I'm not concerned about that. But the problem is the bullpen. It's pretty weak right now. You have Edwin Diaz, best closer in the game. You have Drew Smith,
mediocre at best.
asshole. And then you have a bunch of question marks. You have question marks. Let's face it.
Yeah, they have depth.
Yeah.
You have
I think
relievers.
Bryce Montes
nine...
I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name. I think
you
he's
nailed
got
it.
disgusting stuff, but we don't know what he can be because we've seen him for 2 1/3, something like that.
I think he got about 7 or 8 games in.
Right.
They have depth, but they're missing the actual like major league relievers.
Right.
You know, it's like if they had starters 6 through 9, but they didn't have 2, 3, 4, 5 signed.
Right.
You know, you have probably 2 bullpen spots. Oh god, between Writings, Woods, Brigham, Hernandez, Montes de Oca, Figure Budo, and maybe a Yohan Lopez.
Right.
I figure they bring in a pick in the Rule 5 draft. You probably have 2 bullpen spots.
Those are lottery chips. That's what they are.
You got 2 bullpen spots there.
Right.
You'll have a rotating door of those 6 or 7 guys in the last 2 spots, which is fine.
Mhm.
Because if the Mets really do trust what they're doing, those spots should hit.
Yeah.
At least 2 of those guys should hit. But you're then missing relievers 6, 5. We'll call Smith 4, 3, and 2.
Yeah.
You're missing 4 major league relievers.
Right. That's a problem.
And sure, you could throw McGill back in the bullpen, put Peterson in the bullpen, whatever, and like that Trevor Williams type role.
Mhm.
But you are missing dudes.
Yeah. And that's what you need. You need dudes. So I think that's
You
where you get creative in
bodies,
the trade
man.
market. That's where you get creative in the trade market, where you trade James McCann, attack your prospect, go get or an Eduardo Escobar, go get someone from Milwaukee because they trade people like it's nothing. Go get Pete Fairbanks from Tampa Bay. Go get a Josh Stallman from Kansas City. If you want to make this my number 4, fine, but I'm also including this one. Bring in a damn lefty reliever that can actually get people out. I know in the past, this past year, Ottavino was able to get out both righties and lefties. Seth Lugo was, Drew Smith was, but guess what? Sometimes you need an actual lefty to get out Bryce Harper, to get out Yordan Alvarez, to get out Freddie Freeman. Bring in Andrew Chafin, for Christ's sakes. He was there last year, just sitting there. He's
there
practically
again.
saying, "Hey, Mets, sign me, God damn it!" But they never did.
Would you accept Peterson in that role? Or no, because it'd be his first time doing it.
I'm not quite ready to say I'm ready to give Peterson the reins of being the top lefty. I'm not comfortable saying that.
Would you be comfortable with him being on the opening day roster in the rotation?
With in rotation? Where in the
Let's
rotation?
say these
Where
are
in the
your
rotation?
5. These
I'm
are
fine
5.
with that. I'm okay with that.
It's okay. That's
We
interesting.
saw
just making sure you have a good head on your shoulders.
we
that
saw
you're okay
some
with
very good flashes from Peterson last year.
sustained success.
Yeah, and
He
especially
just fell
because
off at the end.
as you said multiple times this past year, he was the Braves' daddy this year. He took the Braves lineup, tucked it in, and read it a bedtime story. He owned
Jesus.
that lineup. So you saw nice patches of success from David Peterson as a starter. You saw some clunkers. You saw some bad outings. They tried to make him a leverage reliever. That Yankees outing did not work. But he has the stuff to be a quality. I'll go as high as saying in spots, a quality 4 in the Mets rotation.
16 innings, 5 earned against Atlanta, 22 strikeouts. That's pretty good.
I'm not mad about that.
I think he has a potential to be like a 4-3 type starter.
A high-end 4, I think,
High
is
end
a ceiling.
4, good. It's a 3 on a good team, not a team that wants to win a World Series.
That's yeah.
You know, I think Peterson would have been a good 3 on the 2019 Mets.
Mhm.
But I just don't know if the Mets are in a spot to. It's the most important offseason in franchise history.
You can argue that.
I don't
without
know.
question.
I don't know if they're in a spot to just kind of let him kind of learn that. I think you hope they go into the year that he's their 6 or 7. I don't think you want something where you go into the year where McGill and Peterson are competing for the 5 spot.
Right.
No one loves training camp battles more than me.
Oh, big fan.
No one loves them more than me.
Big fan.
I remember being pumped when Jacob Barnes won the last bullpen spot. He ended up sucking.
It was
I was
awful.
Like
But
this
hey, we got a body for him.
I was like, this motherfucker just, I was feeling it.
That guy stunk.
Like he stuck. That's fine. But I think the Mets being a spot where Peterson and Mike was alluding to this earlier. Mets being in a spot where Peterson, McGill is your 6-7 is ideal.
Yeah.
I think
Those
if
are
you're
good depth arms.
I think there's starters in most other rotations.
Yeah.
I think if you're in a spot where you're competing for that's your 5 and what the other is a 6, you're probably still in a good spot. Because that means, you're in a good spot if you're able to land a higher tier starter, a Senga, DeGrom, Rodon, Verlander. So now if you're going Senga, DeGrom, Scherzer, Senga,
Cookie.
Carrasco, Peterson, that's still a good 5.
I'm fine with that.
That's still a good 5.
I don't know who's going to be their 3. I do agree with you and with Mike saying they're going to bring in 2 front end rotation guys. I just don't know who they're going to be. Hopefully
I think they're going to
DeGrom.
bring in another number 1 and they'll bring in a mid-tier starter.
I agree.
I wouldn't rule out.
I think the 3 is going to be a trade. I don't know why. I don't know who it's going to be. I think it's going to be a trade.
I wouldn't rule out them bringing back Taiwan Walker.
Yeah.
Look,
There's a report today they might want to try to bring back Chris Bassett. I think he's going to cost too much, but you never know.
I think Bassett's gone. I don't think Bassett wants to be a Met. Listen to what that dude said in his press conference at the end of the year.
Right.
He does not. I think he took New York as a learning experience and a way to make himself more valuable.
And he did.
I know, because you go from not pitching really that many big games in Oakland.
Right.
Even the big games aren't that pressure filled to you're in a stretch run and a dead sprint in New York, the largest media market in the country.
On the planet.
Right. So I think if you're, I think it's totally possible. Let's say they bring back just DeGrom and Verlander, or DeGrom and Walker.
I was gonna say DeGrom and Verlander.
That'd be fun.
That'd be fun, but also be anxiety inducing because then you have three aging pitchers where every time they don't pitch more than 5 innings, like, well, what's the injury now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good chance they just bring back DeGrom, Walker, and let McGill and Peterson duke it out. No, I mean, I say a good chance. I think that's something they're considering.
Sure.
Because you also have to be cost efficient.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, in a couple of years, you have to lock up the best second baseman in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You have to lock up your power hitting first baseman.
Mm-hmm.
These are all truths.
Yeah.
So I expect them to spend. I don't know if they're gonna go over 300 million.
You're into my next question. Okay.
I think they might. I think they will, but I don't think they're gonna blow through it and have a 375 payroll.
Yeah, I'm not going with Sandy Alderson said he might have a $350 million payroll next year. I'm not going to believe that. I'm not going to go that high. Maybe 310, 315, but 350. I don't know.
Look, I mean, they're penciled in for what, 200 right now?
I don't have.
I think it's around 200. We'll call it 215.
Sure.
You need to have 4 major league arms, a legitimate ace, and a good number 2, and a center fielder. It's gonna be hard to do averaging $10 million a player.
Right. We also have to remember they're likely stripping away 20 million of that. Which leads into my next one, number 4. Stealing another one from you. Give Beatty and Alvarez rain every day. They got to play. We need to see what they have. So trade McCann. And again, I love the guy. Trade Escobar. Because you need to see what these kids have. You have a very good, one of the better backups in baseball in Tomas Nido. So maybe you don't let Alvarez play 145 games, but he starts 120 games, 115 games. Nido starts the other ones. You're in a good spot there. And even then, you can have Nido start other games, have Alvarez be your DH. Let the kid play every day. Give him a shot. He's one of the top prospects in baseball for a reason. The bat's there. The arm is there. The glove and the defense is developing. Give him a shot every day. Give Brett Brady a shot every day.
I'm more confident about Brett Beatty being a consistent contributor next year than, to be completely honest, than Francisco Alvarez.
I mean, we saw, and it was a very, very small sample, but in his first game, his very first swing, home run of the major leagues in Atlanta, hostile environment.
I think
That's big time.
Beatty just looked more adjusted to major league pitching.
100. Oh, that's not even a question.
Alvarez looked, I mean, obviously you don't hit a 440 tank by accident,
Sure.
but against quality pitching in Atlanta, he did nothing. No, he feasted on the quad A end of the season guys from Washington.
He hit out again. I think the kid's
Tank.
going to be a stud. Mike Moon Rookie of the Year, but his home run was against Eric Fetty or something like that. I mean,
someone
I
who's
think he
probably
signed on
not
the KBO or
employed
something
by
like
a
that.
major league team.
Right. And listen, the ball still hasn't landed. But
No, absolutely. But I just my opinion, I think Beatty's will more likely to be a consistent contributor next year. I think Alvarez is probably the most likely scenario, has an up and down year.
we talked about it, and
And I think you're going to have to just remember that these are also going to be guys playing their first full major league
they're
season.
kids. But Brett Beatty never looked overmatched. I
He
never
might have
looked
looked
at Brett
bad.
Beatty. I never looked at Brett Beatty and said he never had a chance of that at bat. Or, well, it was a lot of soft contact. Everything he hit was on the screws. In the short time he was active, he had the highest average exit velocity in baseball. That means something. You're squaring up the
Yeah.
baseball every time. And no shift, that might help you out a little bit more. Alvarez, he looked overmatched against Kenley Jansen.
He looked over and matched just Atlanta.
That entire series.
Yeah.
A couple times you hit the ball well, but you hit it to like Austin Riley, and that's just not who you want to hit it to.
Right. And if you're hitting it well, but to the third baseman.
Right.
For a big bopper. Wow,
Mhm.
words were not wording there for a second.
Words are hard, man.
They are. But for a big bopper, a guy you're bringing up mainly because of insane raw power, you want to see better than that.
I mean, listen. You hit a 108-mile-per-hour piss missile down the third baseline. Enough. Some of those they're going to get down the line. They're going to get misplayed.
Yeah,
You're going to get your hits. It's just a matter of who's playing third base. Austin Riley this year was a damn near Gold Glover. He was in the past couple of years, but this year somehow everything clicked. So give the kids rain every day. Let them play. So whether it be trade McCann, trade Escobar, or, listen, keep Escobar as a bench piece. I'm fine with that too. But that's my number 4. Number 5. And this is not a roster thing. It's not really an on the field thing. Well, it's kind of on the field. I don't ever, and I mean ever, truly want to see a live in-game DJ in Citi Field ever again. Ever again.
You're anti Timmy Trumpet?
Oh, no. That's different. I'm talking about bringing DJs to play in center field during the games. I don't want that. I'm not a fan of it.
They
And
did
also, something maybe you don't know about me. I'm a teensy bit superstitious.
They did
It
that.
seems like, buddy, so much.
I'm in Orlando. I can't go to games.
And also, they had one there every game during the wild card series. That didn't play out too well. I'm a teensy bit superstitious. I went to a few games this past year, as you may know. Part-time season ticket holder. I think they've lost all but 2 of the games that they had a live DJ there. I never want to see it again.
Interesting.
Ban the live DJs. Timmy Trump is a different thing.
Okay, I thought that's where you're. I thought because like you're one of those. Oh, the season fell apart after Timmy Trumpet, even though it's not true.
No, not true. I never want to see a live DJ there. Ban him. Ban him. Can't happen. So that's my 5.
I just want to remind you of one thing.
Remind me, please.
That this is coming to Citi Field this year. Oh God.
I know what it is. It's the obnoxiously large scoreboard. Yeah. Now,
I'm going to ask you.
is that confirmed?
Oh, yes. This goes from past the Shea Bridge. This is like a whole section and a half.
I hate it.
But why?
It's I'm not a fan of that. Why? Like, why? Why do you need that big of a scoreboard? What's the point? You're trying to be Jerry Jones? What's the point?
I think I was talking
Maybe
about
this is
with
me
someone.
being old man yelling at cloud,
I
but
think
what's the point of having a jumbotron as big as your outfield?
I think here's my take on it. And I was talking about this with my dad and my uncle because they both worked in sports and news for a while.
Sorry for bashing my head into the microphone. I'm sure that wasn't pleasant for you.
Nah, I didn't hear it.
Okay.
I think you have to remember the City Field is as much a venue as it is a ballpark.
Okay.
Now, when they're on the road, they got all sorts of concerts in there.
Mhm.
You know, I'm sure they're gonna make a push for a Frozen 4 game
Oh, I'm sure.
and
It's at
whatever
Fenway
the
this year.
outdoor series for the NHL does is. I think they've had one of those before. You're going to have insane concerts and festivals there.
Mhm.
You know, you also got to think of stuff like WrestleMania and the WWE, where you can just pack the hell out of the place.
Right.
You know, this is as much of a venue as it is a ballpark. And I think that's why. I think that's why we see the sport. Because it's City Field as much as it is the Mets Stadium.
Mhm.
You know, I'm sure that's where a lot of their a good amount of their money comes from. Is you have 3-4 music festivals a year come in, 5-6 headlining concerts, a bunch of other smaller things. And I think it's just probably part of Steve Cohen's vision of making that whole area a place you want to be. You already have the tennis stadium right there. You got the ballpark, you got the marina. The problem is the slums around it, and you know the City Field hadn't really been upgraded since 2009.
Mhm.
You know, minimal at best. Just like the food, I think it changed a lot. You know, granted, I haven't been to the ballpark since 2017. You know, it's been going on 5 full seasons since I've seen a game at City Field in person. But I remember reading that the food's changed a lot and been upgraded.
Food's fantastic there.
But it seemed like the rest of the ballpark has just kind of been the same, aside from changing the Coca-Cola corner, changing the Pepsi porch to the Coca-Cola corner.
Mhm.
Then when they briefly had those horrendous Chick-fil-A foul poles
So bad.
and a couple other smaller things.
Right.
The Great Wall of Flushing. That's the one I'm thinking of. You know, you bring the fence in a little bit and left, you bring the fence in and right.
Mhm.
Look,
That's gonna
man,
that's gonna add some power. You know, we were saying before, they need to add more power and bringing in the right center field wall. That's probably gonna add 10 to 15 home runs to the Mets total.
yeah.
But
But hey,
neither
I
here nor
mean,
there.
I think another thing is I'm never going to tell the Mets how to make their money.
No,
They
I don't know.
look, you want to build a perennial powerhouse, or in the winter you're still selling out the house. Have at it, man. Look, I mean, Steve Cohen says he wants the Mets to be baseball and entertainment.
Right. But they're building the arena right next to them. That's gonna take away most of the chop shops.
That's the
That's
hockey
gonna be
arena,
where
right?
no, it's gonna be for NYCFC.
What?
Soccer.
Ah, one sport I can't bring myself to get into. I can watch professional curling. Sometimes I'll
Curl,
turn on the
curling's
college.
electric, bro.
Sometimes I'll turn on the college cornhole league.
Also electric.
Can't bring myself to watch soccer. I've followed along the World Cup. I've turned on the American games. You know, I would if Messi goes to Inter Miami, I would go catch an Orlando City game while he's in town.
Yeah.
Can't get into soccer.